Hey guys, what's going on? In this free Archviz tutorial series, I will show you how to create and render this animation, this walkthrough, and these still shots inside Unreal Engine 5. In this part, I'm going to go over camera settings and show you how to render a single shot, sequencer settings, and how to render an animation using the movie render queue, how to create a walkthrough. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it and show you how I've done it.
Okay, so I've gone ahead and added some fill lights to the scene to have better shadows. Let me turn these off to see their effect. Okay. Also, I've added some cameras for cinematic and for some still shots in the scene. So I'm going to go over how to do that. Let's first add a camera and take a screenshot. I'm going to go to quickly add to the project, and from the cinematic add a cine camera actor to the scene. After I add it to the scene, I can go to perspective and place cameras, and here I can choose to view my viewport as the camera. Okay. So let's press G to hide the icons. So after we choose the camera in the outliner, we have all the properties of a real-life camera in the details panel. So let me go through some of them. First of all is the film back. The film back has some presets for the camera, for example the 16:9 digital, and you can go through them to see how they look. This is digital film, this is DSLR, as you can see it is wider, this is 8mm, for example 35mm, and as you can see the aspect ratio has changed. You can go through all of them yourself. And the next one is the current focal length, and we can choose our lens to be a tele or wide lens. For example, we can set it to 80, and for example we can come here and we can set the focus distance, for example manually. This is the shot we get. Or we can set it to a wide shot. For example, let's set it to 20, and as you can see we have a wide shot and we can see the whole room. So let's find a good view. For example, let's say this view. The next property is aperture, and the higher the aperture value is, the more of the objects are in focus. For example, if I have this shot and I want everything to be in focus, I have to set the current aperture to a higher value, for example 22, and everything is in focus. But if I want the focus to be on a specific object or area, I need to set the aperture to a lower value. For example, let's set it to 2, and now I have two options. I can focus on the back of the room, the background, or on the foreground. For example, let's set the manual focal distance to and as you can see, as we change the focus distance, our focus changed. Okay. But this is not possible with a high aperture value. These are the parameters you need to know: the film back, focal length, and the aperture and the focal distance. And you can pretty much create all the shots you need with these parameters. One other thing is that you can go to perspective and change the viewport type to cinematic viewport. After that, I have to go select the camera again, and then on the top right of the viewport we have some overlays to help for the composition of our shot. For example, we have the rule of thirds, or if we want something important to be in the center of the shot, the crosshair, and we have the rabatement. For this one I'm going to go with the rule of the thirds, and I'm going to change the focus from this planter to the background. Let's set the focus distance to a higher value. Okay, now we have two options to take a still shot from our viewport. First one is to press F9 while the viewport is enabled. After we press F9, click on this link, on this address on the bottom right of the screen, and it opens the folder in which the screenshot has been saved. And as you can see, but right now this image is low quality. But if we want higher quality screenshot, for that we go to the top left of the viewport and click on high resolution screenshot, and from here we can increase the screenshot size multiplier, for example by 2, and let's capture. And as you can see, the name is also different. Its name is high res screenshot, and if I go to the properties, it is twice the size of the previous screenshot. And also we have one other option, and it is to increase the screen percentage, and let's say to 200. And if we increase the screen percentage, it is rendering everything in the viewport twice the size that it is, and then compressing it back to the actual size. For example, if we are rendering a 2K image, it will render it in 4K and then compress it back to 2K, so the details will be much sharper and better looking. So let's capture another one. Okay, so that's how you render out a still image or a screenshot from Unreal Engine. So how do we go about rendering an animation with Unreal Engine? And for that I'm going to create a sequence. So let's create another one, and for that I'm going to right click in the content browser and go to the animation and create a level sequence. I'm going to name it sequence 40. And let's open it. First thing we have to do is to add the camera to the sequence. And after we add it, it is sort of straightforward. So first I want to show the time of my sequencer in seconds. So I'm going to click here, and here we can choose the FPS of our animation. For example, if I want to have a stop motion output, I can render it out with a lower FPS, or if I want to create a slow motion output, I have to render it out with a higher FPS. For this project I'm going to go with 30 FPS. So let's go to show time as and select seconds. Okay, so I want my animation to be 4 seconds. So after we go to 4 seconds, I can click here and set the end of the animation to here, and let's also click and drag the camera cut to encompass this area. So all I need to do is move my camera and create keyframes, and I can create keyframes for almost everything the camera has. For example, select the camera in the outliner, and all these properties in the details panel you see that have this add keyframe icon on the right, they can be keyframed in the sequencer. So for this one I'm going to change the focal distance and also the transform. So let's go to the beginning of the animation and let's set the transform to here, and let's also change the manual focal distance so the planter in the foreground is in focus. Okay, that's good. Let's add a keyframe here. Okay, I'm going to dock the sequencer next to the content browser. For the end of the animation, let's go to the end of the animation and move the camera. For example, I want the camera to be here. Okay, so let's add a keyframe to the transform, And also let's change the focal distance to okay. It automatically added a keyframe for the manual focal distance. So now let's play it. I'm going to go to the beginning of the animation, press play. So I think it is good. We have also the option to go to the curve editor and select the transform and select all of the keys, right click and change their behavior. For example, if I want them to be linear, and let's see how it is. And if they are auto, so for this specific shot I think a smooth start and a smooth ending is better. So that's pretty much how I created all of these sequences. Let's take a look at some of them. Notice that after I create each sequence, I enable this camera so that the viewport shows the sequencer camera. Okay, so now let's get to how to render these sequences we have created, and for that I'm going to use render movie queue. So let's first enable it by going to settings, plugins, and search for movie render queue and enable both of these plugins, movie render queue and movie render queue additional render passes. After you enable them, it will ask you to restart your project. Restart it, and after that, if you go to Windows Cinematic, you have the option for movie render queue. And from here you can add whichever sequence you want to the movie render queue. For example, let's add the sequence we created in this tutorial, and in the settings tab, if we click on it, a new Windows open. In this Windows we have some options for how we want the movie render queue to render out the animation. For example, we have the option to choose the format we want to export out. For example, we have all of these formats. I usually use PNG or EXR, and we can also add anti-aliasing to the rendering, and by increasing these parameters in anti-aliasing we can have a higher quality render. Also we have some other options. For example, we have all of these rendering options. Mostly we use deferred rendering, or in some cases path tracer rendering. We also have the output settings. In this part we can set where we want to save the animation, the file name format, or the resolution. I usually leave them on their default, but change the output resolution based on what I need. And also another option is you can add console variables to your render. So these are basically the console commands we use in the editor to increase the quality or change some of the settings in our viewport, and we can add them in here to the movie render queue so that they will be calculated during the rendering. Another useful option is that after we set up all of the settings we want, we can save it as preset and use it in future or and also in other projects. So I've already created and used 2 presets in my project. Next I'm going to show you my presets. So from here I have 2 presets, one low quality for testing, and one of them is high quality for the final render. So I'm going to go over the high quality one. So as you can see, I export as PNG with deferred rendering, and the anti-aliasing I used 2 spatial sample counts and 16 temporal sample counts, and also for warm-up I used 100 render and 200 engine counts. And the warm-up part is for the things that need to be calculated before the render is started. For example, if you need a particle system in your scene. And for console variables, you can stop the video here and copy my console variables. And for output, I usually render out full HD animations. Okay. So after we set that up, we should press accept. In here we have the output directory, and if you click on it, the output directory opens. And after that, all you need to do is to press render and the rendering will start. But before rendering, always remember to save your project. Sometimes your settings for the render may be high and Unreal Engine will crash, so you don't want to have any unsafe settings in your project. So let's press Ctrl Shift S to save all, and let's press render. One other thing you need to consider is if you have more than one level in your scene, meaning you have a persistent level and some sub levels, you need to make sure that the streaming method of the sub levels is set to always, or the movie render queue won't render them. So in my case, I have a data smith level, so let's right click on it and change it from blueprint to always loaded. Okay, now let's save. So after you save everything, all you need to do is to press render, and the render window will open. And after the render is finished, you can click on this address and it will open where your image sequence has been saved. After that, all you need to do is select all of the images and import them into a video editing software such as DaVinci Resolve or Adobe Premiere, and export your animation out. So we can't have an Archviz project without a walkthrough. So now let's set up Unreal's Archviz character into our scene.
But before we set it up, let me say that Unreal's default Archviz character seems to have a bug in the current version, that is 5.0. But as it worked fine in Unreal 4.27, I expect this bug to be fixed in the future versions.
And for that, first let me set it to default viewport and close the sequencer. So let's go to the folder you want, create a blueprint folder, open it, right click, select blueprint class, and from all classes search for Archviz. Select the Archviz character and create it. Then let's name it bp_Archviz. Okay, after you create it, drag and drop it in your scene, and it is where your character will spawn and your walkthrough will begin. So let's place it in the entrance of the room, and this arrow shows where you're looking. I think a 45-degree is good. Okay, so after that, go to details panel and search for poses and set the auto poses player to player 0. Now let's open the blueprint, and here on the right in the details panel we have the Archviz controls. We have to set up some of these in the project setting. So let's arrange them like this. Okay, and in the project settings we need to go to engine input, and from here we need to add some axis mappings. So, and pay attention that the names should be exactly as the Archviz controls names. So let's first create one and name it and move forward. So let's copy move forward and paste it here. And for move forward, we need to set W key and set the scale to 1, and also set the S key and set the scale to -1. The next axis mapping is move right, and move right I want it to be the D key, and let's add another one and set it to A key and set the scale to -1. Okay, so for example in here W goes forward and S, because the scale is -1, goes backward, and also in here D goes right and A goes left. So the next one, so lookup is for up and down orientation, and for that I'm going to search for mouse Y and set the scale to -1. And also let's create another axis mapping, and this is the last one, and it is for looking right and left. So let's copy turn, and in here let's search for mouse X, and the scale should be 1. Okay, so now let's compile and save the blueprint and close the project settings. And now there is a problem. If I press play, we can't walk in the room because there is no collision, so we will fall down. So the next thing is that we have to add collision to the meshes we want to have collision. For example, in this project I only want the structure to have collision. So I'm going to select all of the meshes in the room folder, press Ctrl B to find them in the content browser, right click, from asset actions let's select bulk edit via property matrix. So in here I can add collision to all of them, but first let me show you how to add collision for one of these. For example, for the floor, let's open the mesh from the details panel. So from the details panel I can scroll down, and in the collision section, in the collision complexity, I can change it from project default to use complex collision as simple. So this one is kind of a heavier collision, but because our project is small, it's okay to use it. So what it does is it will create a collision exactly like the mesh. So if we have a mesh with high triangle count, the collision will be heavy. But because in our project the structure is low poly, it's okay to use this method. Another method that we can use is to select collision and, for example, add one of these presets to the mesh. For example, we can add a box, and this is the collision box. I can select it and delete it. Or we can add let's add a sphere so you can see it. Okay, but in our project, as I said, the structure is low poly, so I will add collision with this method. Let's go to the property matrix editor, search for collision. I can change the collision complexity from project default to use complex collision as simple. And let's also save all, close it, and now if I press Alt C in my viewport, you can see that all of the structure has collision. So after I press play, let's click in the viewport and the player will be enabled, and now we can move in our viewport.
So as you can see, as I said, everything is fine with this pawn except for it looks up and down really slowly. I think they will fix it in the future versions. but right now it is good to know you have this option to easily add a character to your scene and be able to walk around. And you can add collision for whichever of the furniture you like. After you're done with your walkthrough, you can press the escape key on the keyboard to exit from it. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it and I hope it's been helpful. And if it was, make sure to like and subscribe down below. I'm Hoj and I create Archviz projects with Unreal Engine. Thank you guys for watching and I'm gonna see you in the next one.